Joining us on the Heister Automotive Group Hotline, columnist, news and observer, he is Luke DeCock. And hi, Luke. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good.
I guess Jordan Staal's bank account's good too. 4 years, 2.9 mil a year, and people are like, "What? 4 years, Luke? 4? That's nuts!" But I guess we have to wait for the details of the deal to actually emerge before we can really have opinions on it. And I guess this ends up making some sense for the Canes in the grand scheme of things, right?
Yeah, no, the details are out. It's declining, and the value, the actual money they pay him declines each year. And that fourth year is really easy to trade or buy out or do any number of retire. It's technically an under 35 contract. So if he were over 35, they'd be stuck for the whole contract, regardless of whether he retires or not. In this case, they've got some outs, and the contract is structured in a way that, is very sort of team friendly. At the end of it, and look, I don't think anyone, even Jordan Staal, expects to play that fourth year, and maybe not even that third year. But the way the fourth year is structured with a really low salary and a signing bonus, it makes it really easy to dispose that contract one way or another. And he gets the no trade protection he wants. Mm-hmm. None of this is going to happen without his sort of protection or authority. And, I think the question for me now is less, what does this contract mean? All that. It's, how do you sort of manage now that you've agreed to keep Jordan Staal presumably for another 2 to 3 years? How do you manage the eventual transition to Sebastian Aho, which we all know is going to happen, and he's going to get a great big contract, possibly as early as next week, which is the earliest they can sign an extension with him, and he's going to get, an 8-year extension that's worth a ton of money. And a lot of the money that's not going to Jordan Staal anymore is going to end up in Sebastian Aho's pocket, and he's going to end up wearing the C at some point too. And this is a subject that's really touchy for Rod Brind'Amour because of the way the transition to Eric Staal was handled 13 years ago. That really left a sore spot for Rod Brind'Amour in the way that was handled. He was not happy with how Jim Rutherford and Paul Maurice handled that. I think that's one reason why things were a bit frosty between him and Paul during the conference finals. He's going to want to make sure that's done right. And whether that means Jordan Staal wears the C till his last game as a Hurricane, or there's some sort of managed transition to Sebastian Aho, I think that's going to be a really interesting storyline to watch over the next couple of years, because it is increasingly going to become Aho's team. He's going to have the salary. He's going to have the role. He has the personality and attitude. He's a fierce competitor. The players follow him. He's going to be a good to great captain someday. That sometimes it takes being in that role, like it did with Rod Brind'Amour, to figure out how good you really are at it. But that transition is going to be really interesting to watch.
Luke, this was the easy deal to knock out, though. What deal on the horizon there with the Canes that you look at on the roster and go, this could be a hiccup?
Well, the big one has, and everyone's seen this coming for years now, is you've got Brett Pesce and Brady Shea and Jacob Slavin on really team-friendly contracts, 2 of which expire next year and the other expires in 2 years. You've got to figure out, are you keeping all 3? Can you keep all 3 and not hurt the rest of the roster? That's why when we talk about the Hurricanes and their window, it is a finite thing with this group and this operation, and that's why last year was such a disaster, because you lose to a pretty objectively inferior team overall. And this year, you had a chance against a team that was the 8th seed. These are things that chances you may not necessarily get with this group again. And really the contracts of the defensemen are really the questions to answer. You can keep all 3. Mm-hmm. It's just going to be a question of, how you handle that and who else has to go, because it is a cap league and the Hurricanes are a cap team. So, those are all things that are going to have to be addressed. But those are the sticky ones to me. And that's why there's been a lot of trade rumors with Brett Pesce and Brady Shea. I don't think there's anything, concrete behind them at this point. It's just something that obvious that anybody can throw at the wall. But those are conversations that are ongoing, and Hurricanes need answers on the long term on Shea and Pesce so they can kind of figure out what to do with the rest of the roster.
Speaking of deals, as of this recording, it has not gone through yet, but it appears that Tony DeAngelo will be returning to the Carolina Hurricanes after the Philadelphia experiment didn't go so hot. Now, there's larger issues with Philadelphia, but I guess the fit wasn't there. Where does this stand? And I'll get to my next question after that.
As far as I can tell, it's being held up by the league because there's concerns about the Hurricanes trading for a guy. Philadelphia did sign into the contract, but the Hurricanes traded his rights to Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. There's some cap circumvention questions. Sounds like the league wants to hash this out with everybody at the draft, which is this week in Nashville. It just seems like there were some questions raised about whether this was the Hurricanes. It's crazy to think about circumventing the cap to get Tony DeAngelo on your roster. You'd think you'd be circumventing it to get him off your roster. But that's the question that seems.
Well, I guess
a bigger question. I think this is your next question.
Yeah.
Bigger question is, why on earth would you do it?
Well, okay, that actually is my next question.
Because they won't have to pay the full freight. That's why.
I guess it's one of those things. It worked once, right? You know, it's the old Bomani Jones scratch and dent special, right? Like, here's damaged goods. You got them for $1, and he gave you replacement level performance from Dougie Hamilton, who was getting made $9 million. Okay, so it worked once. All right. Well, if I can get somebody else to pay half his salary, and he'd be making what, 2.5 mil? With the Canes?
2.5 mil against the Hurricanes cap. Yeah.
Okay, against the Hurricanes cap. If you can get a guy who produces offensively, is a defensive liability, I can see where we might want to kick tires on that again on the cheap, right?
Yeah, this is a Shane Gostisbehere replacement. You know, it's a guy who can run the second power play. He would have much less responsibility this time around with Brent Burns here. I mean, he becomes a fifth defenseman. I mean, he's not going to be playing with Jacob Slavin again. You know, my question would be, we just talked about the Rangers series and what a debacle that was. Do you want a guy back who was such a liability in the playoffs,
right,
both in the Boston series and the Rangers series?
Right.
Well, he was over as the number 2 guy.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He was terrible in the playoffs. It doesn't matter what role he was in. Sure. He wasn't the chemistry issue that everybody feared he would be. He wasn't, constantly booed by the fans. I think they sort of said, okay, when he does well, we're willing to applaud him, whether we like the guy or not. And he did do some things really well. He was a great regular season player he was a good regular season player for the Hurricanes. And as you said, he did what they needed him to do. He kept his nose clean while he was here.
Yeah.
There weren't any big fireworks. So, I mean, I can understand. And look, when you talk about distressed assets, I mean, it's Tom Dundon's eyes light up. You can get something on the cheap. That's how you make money. You buy things cheap and sell them for more. They've done it once with DeAngelo. I get all of that. And look, they got away with it once. I just think you're asking lightning to strike twice a little bit there. It's not what I would do even at $2.5 million.
I mean, it could be my
it's
Galaxy.
Very Jimmy Rutherford of Don Waddell to go back and get another player, a little recycling action.
Or it could just be Rod Brind'Amour. I mean, I tweeted this. I'm sure you saw it, where it's like, fine, you're not going to put me in the Hall of Fame for my on ice performance. But what if I told you I was the only dude in the NHL who could ever get anything of value out of this distressed asset?
Yeah, and look, in a smaller role, he may be even more effective, which is only going to sort of burnish your case there. And look, maybe they took one look at the market for defensemen and said, this is the best we can do. I mean, Shane Gostisbehere has a chance to make a lot of money. I don't think he was actually way better defensively than his reputation with the Hurricanes. That actually kind of surprised me a little bit, but there's a lot of money in being an offensively capable defenseman in today's NHL. And Tony DeAngelo is that. I just feel like you got away with it once. You're really playing with fire trying to get away with it again, especially when this may be the last year for this core group of players.
Yeah.
Is that a risk you want to take, especially if you're bringing both goalies back, which I'm a little surprised. I get it. I'm a little surprised. And the other contract you asked about surprises earlier, I really thought Jesper Fast would be re-signed by now. I feel like that's a core guy for them and should be an easy one, and you knock it out quickly. So the fact that that's gone to the end of June, which is we're talking today, that raises an eyebrow a little bit. Doesn't mean there's any hiccups there. I haven't heard of anything tangible that's gone wrong there. I just thought that would be sort of an easy slam dunk, put it in your bag and move on.
A technical cap question for you, since you're smarter than me. Because people are like, well, they lose Max Pacioretty's money. What will they do with that money? That's just going to be eaten up by Aho's raise and the defenseman's raises and all that, right? Like they're not going out and getting another player at that number, correct?
No, because the cap's not. We're in this period of the COVID imposed cap freeze where the cap isn't going up as they sort of recapture the money lost to COVID. So the Hurricanes basically have to deal with all these more expensive contracts, Aho. Whatever they end up doing on defense in this sort of same window they had last year. So yeah, the Pacioretty money is going to get eaten up. There might be some of it. And then people are like, well, they got to spend it during the year. Well, yeah, when he went on injured reserve, you get that $7 million back. You can go spend it on other things. Same as they did sort of a little bit with Svechnikov's money at the end of the year, but you don't get to keep that the next year. You're back to where you started. So yeah, there isn't. I mean, they do have $7 million, but a lot of that's going to go to Aho. Basically, the Aho contract gets paid for, that and Jordan Staal's pay cut, and then the rest of what's left over, will go to whatever forward fills that role. I think we're going to see a couple sort of salary clearing trades to give them some more flexibility.
Okay.
Whether that's a Teuvo Teravainen who's got 1 year left on his deal. If you decide you're not in with Teuvo for the long term, this is the summer you're going to get the most value for him. That's something that could happen at the draft if they decide to do it. Or, based on Dundon's comments at the end of the year to me, I mean, his feeling was, let's run this back with this group and give it one more chance. So yeah, the Pacioretty money is going to go to holding the group together.
Yeah, and we can close on this. Luke DeCock from the News and Observer. Your conversations with Tom Dundon, our conversations with Tom Dundon, I think all of us can agree he's never going to strike anybody as a sentimental type. You brought up Jimmy Rutherford, right? Rutherford was a sentimental type. He's going to bring people back, yada, yada, yada. Dundon's looking at, this has worked out with every contract situation that they've done. This is what we think you're worth. And you're free to go somewhere else. It gets back to something Rod Brind'Amour told us, right? It kind of gets back to the Tony DeAngelo point. Hey, by all means, go get money somewhere else. And what did Rod Brind'Amour tell us?
Every year, somebody calls back and says, hey wish I was still there.
Right.
Nino Niederreiter last year.
Yeah.
So the Canes kind of have, with Rod in tandem, have this kind of reputation they've built up over the last 5 years, where I feel that the Canes are perfectly comfortable telling people, hey, man, this is what we think you're worth.
Love you, mean it.
Love you, mean it. You'd be good here. You'd be good here. You like it here. This is what we got for you. If you want to seek something else out, by all means, go ahead. We're not going to get in your way. So that's why the initial reaction to the Jordan Staal deal was, look, they're not sentimental. This has to work for both parties if they're going to make it work. And sure enough, that 35-plus contract situation makes it work for the Carolina Hurricanes. So it's the Sebastian Aho one that I'm truly fascinated by, right? That's the one I'm fascinated by because he's told us, Dundon told us, he's told you, Luke, it's going to happen. Okay. Well, last time it happened because Montreal stepped up and made things a little bit easy for you. Is this going to be as easy as they kind of make it sound to be?
Yeah, I think it will. And I mean, I don't know that as easy as they make it sound, but I think it's something that will happen easily because the term is kind of settled. There's no arguing over how long it's going to be. Everyone knows it's going to be 8 years. And his value on the, in a re-sign situation, I mean, it's pretty determined. Look, Seabass is getting paid.
Okay.
Hurricanes know it. He knows it.
Gotcha.
There's no argument over future value. He's in his prime. He may not be a superstar, but he's a star. This is not like, is Svechnikov going to be a 60-goal scorer or a 40-goal scorer or 30? Like, Sebastian Aho. You're going to pay him to be Sebastian Aho. So, yeah, I really don't think there's a ton of mystery in this. I think, this is not here's what we think you're worth. We're going to walk away if you don't like it situation. This is we've got to sign you for the long term. You're a core player. What's a number that makes everybody happy situation? Yeah. It's a big difference. Like you go back to 2018 in that draft, that the night of the first round, Noah Hannafin and Elias Lindholm were both told, here's the number. If you don't take it, we are trading you tomorrow. Yeah. And they woke up the next morning back with Bill Peters. So, that now they're both back. They're both trying to get out of Calgary. And the Elias Lindholm would be a great fit for the Hurricanes if they could make it work. So, it's funny how that happens in the big picture of things. And hey, man, if Adam Fox had signed with the Hurricanes, we probably look at that deal completely differently, even though it still worked out fine. I mean, they needed Dougie, and Michael Furlan's great week was a great week. But beyond that, the Aho deal is so obvious and so easy that okay. I shouldn't say so easy. It's so obvious. There's no edges to grind here, right? You're not getting that extra quarter point because you're deferring it, blah, blah. It's just, you do it and you take your medicine and you move on. And it's an easy one because you love the kid as a player, as a teammate, as a future captain. Mm-hmm. You want him to be happy. It's one you do. Yeah, that doesn't mean you can sit down and do it over one beer, but it gets done.
Luke DeCock, News and Observer columnist. Hey, man, we appreciate it. We will talk to you later.
All good. See you guys.